Hello, what's going on YouTube fam? This is J Money here, and I'm bringing you guys the top 5 sleeper decks of my choice to take to this upcoming North American WCQ. Now, I do need to get some sort of consistent uploading schedule going, regardless of my job, because I know other people do it, but fact remains that when it comes to a job involving security, if anybody calls out or calls in, whatever, then you are on call, because absolutely no post can be left unattended at any point in time. So that really sucks. So I worked 16 hours straight yesterday, no break, and I got off and I slept for 14 hours because I was at a tournament prior to, so I didn't get a nap. But that's just me. But anyway, before I get to the top 5, I want to have a couple honorable mentions. Now, one being ABCs. Now, I want to go ahead and talk about why I put this in the honorable mentions. Even though it did get a top 32 cut at YCS New Jersey, you know, you would think I would actually have this on one of the sleeper decks. But the problem is, with the loss of Ancient Fairy Dragon, it has lost a lot of its consistency and power. Ceilings have gone slightly down. Now, Calvin Tahan is just a guru with the deck. You know, he knows all the ins and outs, and he executes his plays perfectly when it comes to this, especially when playing around cards like Called by the Grave, which is another card that really shuts this deck down, because the moment you tag out and you get Called by the Grave, you're done. That's it. Sometimes now you have to figure out, you know, what are some of the best times to end up tagging out when to let things go, because of cards like Called by the Grave. Not only that, but people are still citing this card when it comes to Ghost Reaper and Winter Chase. So when I pick these sleeper decks, I pick decks that whose meta decks don't really affect all too much, and also whose side decks don't directly affect these decks as well. So if you want to pick a nice sleeper rogue deck to come and take people in by surprise, you got to accomplish those two things. You need to be able to not only, you know, do well against the meta decks regarding your main deck, but you also need to consider, you know, hey, some of the cards that are sided against these other meta decks, can they be sided effectively against my deck as well? And Buster just so happens to fit that category of number 2, and that's why he's in the honorable mentions. Second honorable mention and last honorable mention is Dinosaurs. Now, I really wanted to put this in the top 5 of my my sleeper decks, simply because of the fact that Ultimate Conductor Tyranno is still an amazing card, and when you have cards like Lost World, being able to stop your opponent from hitting you with things like Effect Veiler, Infinite Impermanence, you know, Afterburners, Widow Anchors, what was it, Sequidus, you know, the Altergeist Kirans, things like that. You know, it's pretty good. It's damn good. And in fact, they can even play hand traps. They can play a ton of hand traps, like Veiler, Lockbird, Ash Blossom, and hell, even cards like Cypher and Gear Gamma, simply for the fact that they do play field spells, or they can, depending on if we're playing Lost World build or not. I mean, I played 2 diagrams in a Lost World, or 2 diagrams to Lost World that worked at some point. But and the fact that you can play a lot of hand traps makes this deck pretty viable. But the problem with this deck is it's extremely strong going second. And it's good, but at the same time, it's kind of fragile in terms of, you know, their big boss muscles not having enough protection. Now, if Miscellaneous Saurius was at 3, then I would definitely be all for this deck, hands down, being in the top 5. You know, because you can effectively have your dinosaurs protected from not only hand traps, but things like, you know, Widow Anchors and shit like that. You know, Magispector cards. So, you know, that's just my piece. Especially if you don't open Lost World, it's just not enough. Like making 2 negates, which is like a Logia or a Dolka and a Conductor Tyranno, in this format, when we are focused on a lot more spells and traps, isn't necessarily the best thing. Again, if Miscellaneous Source was at 3 copies, then I would be all for it. So, onto the actual list. And this is gonna, this is gonna surprise a lot of people, but again, these are sleeper decks. Decks that people aren't paying attention to, that are really, really good gems for the WCQ. Number 5, I have Cosmos. Now, why did I pick Cosmos as number 5? Well, reason number 1, everything in this format is targeting again. Look at Tricksters, look at Sky Strikers, look at the Hybrid, look at Altergeist, look at Gokis, and look at Spirals. All their disruptive cards are targeting, except for obviously Tri-Gate Wizard, and Tri-Gate Wizard is easily played around when it comes to this deck, because you have things like, Good Witch being able to bait out a Tri-Gate Negate and then immediately tagging out and summoning an untargetable ship, and essentially watching your opponent not being able to get over something like a Dark Destroyer is pretty funny. Now, when it comes to decks like Gokis and Spirals and even Tricksters, there is one card that this deck does still have to worry about, and that card is Borreload Dragon, because it does not target and it takes the monster, and it could be a big deal. But decks like Cosmos already play a lot of trap cards. There's so many different ways to play this deck. Not only that, but again, this is a deck that's not hurt by hand traps nearly as much as other decks. If you ash something, it's fine. They don't really do too much searching. They really only search with Town, Tin Can, and all that good stuff. If you get drolled, they don't really need to search all that much. Really, all they need is a mulligan. Valor and Impermanence are absolutely useless against this deck, simply because pilots can dodge and big ships can't be targeted and all that good stuff. And against Gokis, once again, if you deal with the Borreload with any of your trap cards, because some of the Cosmo decks are still playing artifacts, some are playing Cosmojos, which I definitely recommend. I always would recommend Cosmojo because it is such a good form of removal. Not only that, but they can also use one of the best traps this format that nobody is really paying attention to, and that is Full Force Virus. Now, Full Force Virus is an auto win against nearly any deck that's not Sky Strikers, because Sky Strikers doesn't really depend on Ray. Now, if you look at all the Tricksters, every Trickster monster in the entire arsenal, except Lilybell, which they're definitely not going to search turn 1 unless they have the OTK, gets wrecked. All Altergeist cards except Conquiri gets wrecked. All Spiral cards except Sleeper, which you're not really summoning if everything gets nuked, gets wrecked. All the Gokis get wrecked. All the, what is it? There's just so many things that Full Force Virus just auto wins against, and it is because of a card like Dogfighter being able to put up tokens that meet the requirements of Full Force Virus. So for those of you who aren't aware, Full Force Virus is a card that is just like Crush Card, except it nukes any and all monsters that are drawn for the next 3 turns and monsters on field and hand on activation with 1,500 or less defense points. And that card right there is incredibly dangerous, and it is one of the, and of course Cosmos, not only having the combination of untargetable ships, but can also side extremely well and abuse a card like Full Force to really just gain the edge against the opponent. Now for number 4, we have Burning Abyss. Burning Abyss is a deck to where it's really, really resilient. It can grind, it can OTK depending on the build you're playing. As I'm currently, playing, my current build is playing a Fluffle engine with cards like Bear and Conductor Tyranno, to where I can establish a pretty restrictive board turn 1, being things like Beatrice and Conductor Tyranno. It's really good, this format, especially since if you're not playing against Spirals or Gokis, or even if you are, the fact that Conductor Tyranno can put such a screeching halt to your opponent's plays is really broken, and the fact that Beatrice stays on the board, you get to dump anything you want. You can dump an Overtex or whatever, and all that good stuff. Now, you don't have to play aggressive. The deck can also play a ton of hand traps as well, and they can also play a ton of floodgates. You know, cards like Anti-Spell is huge. It is really, really good against Sky Striker Tricksters, pure Sky Strikers, because they're really spell heavy. Even a deck like Goki, simply for the fact that they have to resolve rematch to get their plays going. Now against Spirals, it's not as good because of a card like Tough to be able to just completely just out it whenever it wants. But if you have something like Beatrice on the board, you can go Farfa and just banish it and not have to worry about another one, because cards like, you know, Foolish Burial Goods to dump a Rescue or what was it, Big Red to Reek Summon Tough can't really be played because Anti-Spell's a card. They're also a deck that can play cards like Twin Twisters, which is incredible in this format because, as you guys can notice, the best decks are playing quite a few trap cards again. Hatronade is a good card again, mind you. Now against Sky Strikers, if you know your opponent has the set Widow Anchors, if you know which cards are which, you can cherry pick the cards for absolutely free with this deck. With Twin Twisters, you can absolutely blow out your Trickster Sky Striker matchup. You can also blow out your pure Sky Striker matchup, and you can also blow out your Altergeist matchup with this card. Now, Reincarnation does suck against this deck, kinda. That is, if your Trickster opponent is actually smart enough not to shotgun Reincarnation your stuff, because that'd be idiotic, but a lot of people do it anyway. Now, I have this as number 4, because even though Abyss Dweller isn't as relevant, and not a lot of decks are main decking it, there are still a few cards that pose a huge threat to this deck, and one of them is Call by the Grave. If your one copy of Seer gets banished, it really, really hurts. It hurts incredibly, and it can really stop your momentum. It really can. Not only that, but I know people aren't playing Dante in their extra deck as a target for cherries, but the possibility is always still there. So you're forced to play things like Levy of the Sea Dragon for things like Call by the Grave banishing your Seer and things like that. Not only that, but people can always side deck Abyss Dweller as well. People are playing Twin Twisters of their own and stuff like that because of decks like Sky Striker Tricksters and all that good stuff. Simply because most decks that are not Gokis and Spirals are playing back row. So when you're playing back row your own, like Anti-Spells and Mistakes and Torrential Tributes, just know your opponent might already have outs to those cards as well, and that can put a huge damper on your plans. But the deck is still resilient, and there's still a ton of ways to play this deck. Hell, I even side the Fire Lakes and the Travelers if I want to go more grindy, and I need to severely out-resource my opponent. So that's just an idea. Now, for number 3, we have Pendulums. Now, I know a lot of people don't really see Pendulums as a great deck, but the fact remains that this card is still 3 copies, and literally any Pendulum deck that you choose to pick up can do great if you are, if you're going the Steven route, because I do watch Drift Gaming. In fact, I played Pendulums this weekend, and I pulled a couple of pages out of his book, and I played Dynamist, and I only lost once. And my only loss was to Mermills, which I shouldn't have lost to because I was a dumbass, and game 3, I had the auto win, and instead of making Abyss Dweller, I made Bahamut Shark like a dumbass. And when he decides to go Kaiju over my thing and use Infantry like 3 times, I'm sitting over here thinking like, wait, I have an Abyss Dweller in my extra deck. Why did I play Bahamut Shark just to make Toad? I'm like, I'm a dumbass. But anyway, the deck, when I played Altergeist, when I played this deck being Dynamist, I went against Gokis and against pure Sky Strikers, I also went against... Shoot, what did I go against? I forgot who the hell oh yeah, I went against Odd Eyes Pendulums, so somebody else was playing Pendulums. But anyway, against Gokis, surprisingly, this deck does pretty well against, because all I need to do really is Pendulum summon from hand, summon the Dino Mist cards, summon things like Rex, and things like that, and, you know, spin, you know, bait out negates, and spin things back to the deck. You know, Pendulum summoning Dino Mist and all that stuff is pretty good. But anyway, the reason why I like Pendulums as an option, because a lot of people are still not prepared for it, and that mechanic is still incredibly strong. Chronograph is still a 3. Mythical Beast package is still a thing. You have so many plus engines in the deck, and any Pendulum deck at its disposal, and it's just amazing. Hell, even Dynamist Charge, as I realize, is a +2, because when you activate it, you search, and when you link off of any Dynamist monster, you literally get the monster right back to your hand immediately, and things like that. But all tournament, I was literally doing this the entire time. I was making Goblin and a Firewall co-linked. I would have a Bahamut Shark with a Totally Awesome right next to the Firewall, and I would have a Nova and Infinity up top. And if it was bad enough, because a lot of times I already had 4 Dynamists in some circulation, I would use the 3rd Electrum to pop and add a Jackal, and I would link these off into a Unicorn and trigger Firewall's effect to special summon the Jackal and have 4 negates, and it'd be really, really, really bad. But for those of you who want to see a Dynamist profile, and you know, probably some of its plays, just comment below #Dynamist. So yeah, but anyway, Pendulums is still an amazing option, because you can make almost any Pendulum deck good, because Electromite is still at 3 copies, and the Pendulum mechanic is still broken, and Pendulums can actually play through a ton of hand traps if you are playing the aggressive route. If you're, you know, if your deck is meant to push through negates and push through hand traps and all that good stuff, pushing through Droll is like the funniest thing ever. So if that's your thing, then I applaud you. And yeah, so yeah, there's that. So now we're gonna move on to my number 4 pick, or my number 2 pick for sleeper decks, and it's also my favorite deck. It is World Chalice, actually. I didn't really want to showcase this deck, really, but the thing about it is, the undeniable fact is that the fact that playing this deck in a particular manner can get you some amazing ass results is undeniable. The fact that the good pilots go super far with this deck. And what do I mean by this? Well, a subscriber of mine actually contacted me about a week ago. I think it was a week and a half, 2 weeks. I have no idea. But he personally thanked me because he went to a Los Angeles Regionals about, I think it was, yeah, it was almost 2 weeks ago at this point, almost. But he contacted me about 2 weeks ago, personally thanking me regarding changing his view points and changing his mindset on how he played this deck, because again, this deck is incredibly powerful, but a lot of people play this deck incorrectly in some of their card choices. Cards like, you know, Evas and Heralds of Orange Lights, and even Called by the Grace in the main, which actually might be pretty justified now that people are playing like 8 to 12 hand traps again. That might be okay at this point, you know. But you know, breaking boards, you know, is still important. I'd still rather, you know, just evenly or hatronade a board that has a bunch of Altergeist, back row, or, you know, Widowacres plus Reincarnations plus Scapegoats, and forcing all those to activate, you know, shit like that. But anyway, this guy contacted me, thanked me on how I ended up changing his mindset and how he played the deck, and he played like a damn near identical version of my deck, but it wasn't my deck entirely. You know, he played some cards of his own, and that's good. He played his own take on it, but he inherited my mindset on the whole thing, and he got 4th place at this Los Angeles Regionals. And we all know that regionals in California have a lot of competition, and in fact, he played 4 Sky Striker variants of decks and beat all of them, and all that good stuff. So, kudos to you, man. I'm glad you did really well with the deck. I'm glad I actually helped somebody out. In fact, I still want to work with this kid at my locals that has also picked up the deck, and he ended up going X1 at one of these tournaments that I was in. I'm proud of him for that. So glad to know I can start helping some people out. But anyway, Will Chalice is an incredibly powerful deck to where, like Spirals and like Gokis, if piloted by the right person, you can really take off, and this deck has an incredibly high power ceiling still. The fact that you can make Skull Dread, Trigate, Nightmare, Cerberus, Firewall, Archlord Christia, and Gamma Seal is like, it's still auto-win against most decks, against damn near any deck. Except for Sphere Mode, we were never not siding Master Restrict against Sphere Mode because we never want to lose our board. But anyway, Will Chalice is just like Gokis and Spiral, to where it's link-based. You can make the same boards, if not better boards, because Gamma Seal is just awesome, and Archlord Christia is just auto-win, which is actually what caused one of my subscribers that played the deck, the one that played at the LA Regionals. This is actually what caused him to win a ton of his games, was Christia. Christia just auto-won like most of his matchups, which, you know, which kind of confirms my theory about main decking that card, because that card just instant wins, and a lot of people, a lot of World Chalice players or people that play the deck do not main deck that card, and I don't understand why, because even if you go second, if you play like I do, you can break any board and still put it on the field and secure a win. So that's something I didn't understand, but nonetheless, that deck really depends on its pilot all too much to do exceptionally well, and that's why I have it at number 2. Now at number 1, I don't have the deck on me, or any of its cards, but a lot of you know this deck already, and that is Mech Knight Invoked. Mech Knight Invoked is a deck to where it's like Tricksters, to where you have a small condensed package. You know, you don't play that many Mech Knight cards. You play about 3 Blue Skies, 3 Nightfalls, 1 red, 1 yellow, and I believe 1 to 2 indigo, and all you're doing is playing a small condensed invoked package, and the rest of the cards can be whatever you need depending on the format. Now, this deck, I put this at number 1 because of the fact that the ability to play around hand traps, or the fact that it's not as affected by hand traps as it normally would be, is huge. You know, Ash Blossom is a bigger threat now because of the fact that it wasn't as prevalent last format, because it was pretty useless against Pendulums and Dracos with the absurd amount of draw power. Droll and Lockbird doesn't do too much. You know, if they open like a Meltdown, then yeah, it kind of sucks, because I know Droll is the best hand trap right now. But the fact that you can go second against Sky Strikers or Tricksters or the hybrid, decks like Ultrageist, like, it kind of laughs at, because the fact that they're setting all these, they have like a full backfield always set, and then they have like 2 monsters on field at all times, and so you're getting free drops left and right. You're probably getting free Blue Sky, double searches, and things like that, and it's just like you're plussing out for that matchup, and the Trickster matchup and the Pure Sky Striker matchup, because they're setting tons of back row, and you're going to get all these extra pluses off Blue Sky. And the fact that the deck can likely OTK the shit out of decks now, because a lot of these decks are control based, and they're not putting that many monsters on field. Now, Tricksters are playing Scapegoat still. That's something you got to keep in mind. But remember, this is Mech Knight Invoked, to where, like Tricksters, they can adapt to almost any format and play whatever they need to combat it. And since Tricksters and Sky Strikers are a thing, and so are Ultrageist, they can move more towards heavy backfield removal, considering boards that are produced by Tricksters and Sky Strikers aren't really that strong on their monster lineup, but their back row lineup is what's really gonna hurt. So when they make things like Hatronade, because again, that card is good now, don't underestimate that card. Hatronade will fuck over a Sky Striker Trickster matchup. Not only will it force reincarnations to where you no longer have to walk into a reincarnation Droll combo because you forced it active. That's the benefit of Hatronade. The fact that you can force reincarnation to where you're not searching, so you're not walking into a Droll combo to lose your hand, but you're also forcing the active Scapegoat so you don't get blown out on the end phase, so you can actually, you know, play accordingly and eliminate those tokens so they're not a threat on the next turn. And you're robbing your opponent of things like Widow Anchors and all that other subset, you know, impermanences and shit like that, you know, which is huge. It's really, really huge, because again, Magnite and Vote has about like 15 to 18 cards spare in their main deck space that they can use for whatever they want. They can main deck 3 Hatronades, 3 evenly matches, and 3 Lava Golems and 3 Spear Modes if they wanted to, plus some hand traps. You know, they can do whatever the fuck they want with the absurd amount of extra main deck space they have, because of the fact that, hey, all I need is a handful of Magnites and a small Condensed Invoke package, and bam, the rest of the cards I have, I can do whatever the fuck I want. So it's really hard to combat a deck like that that can adapt to, you know, the meta just like Tricksters and not need to go first either. This deck can be a hard going second deck. Now, you know, since people know Magnite Invoke is a deck that wants to go second, you know, these Magnite Invoke players know for a fact their opponent is going to make them go first, so they can side for going first. They can side Scapegoats in, they can side stuff like that to help them go first. And that's just insane, and it's incredible. And that's what I like about Magnite Invoked in this format. So if any player is struggling with a certain matchup, they can just main deck the certain cards appropriately for said struggling matchup and do just fine. So let me know what you guys think about this top 5 list that I laid down for you guys. Did I do enough good enough job explaining some of the you know, my choices and some of the reasons why I believe these are actually good sleeper decks that people should consider picking up if you don't want to play any of the meta decks? Because, you know, if you're anything like me, then you avoid that you actually hate the possibility of a mirror match, and mirror matches are just not my cup of tea. So, and again, if anybody wants to see my Dynomist profile, just comment down below at #Dynomist, and I will see what's up. So, also, I am going to start a miniature series on how to prepare for the WCQ if you are playing X and Y deck. My first video is going to be Burning Abyss. My second one is going to be Altergeist, featuring some person I have met that is probably the best Altergeist player I have ever seen. I've greatly underestimated that deck until I have met him, and he has been playing the deck since Circuit Break, actually. So this guy, I never thought it could make some of these insane plays, these insane plus OTK boards, until I met this guy. So look out for that. You know, there's a Sky Striker player that has more experience with the deck than I do that I will feature. So, you know, just all sorts of different decks that are kind of relevant that maybe people are interested in doing. Maybe I want to play this deck, but I don't know what I need to do to prepare for it. So if somebody is better at the deck that I personally know than then I'll feature them. So thank you guys very much for watching. This is J Money, and I am signing out.